What we're witnessing isn't just diplomatic failure, it's a calculated surrender. And the proof emerged from the most unexpected source, London's newest diplomatic appointment. Let me be direct. The former commander-in-chief just dropped a bombshell that's sending shockwaves through diplomatic channels. "Forget the old borders," he said. But here's what everyone missed. This wasn't just a statement. It was a message, carefully crafted in British diplomatic corridors, meant for Moscow's ears. Think about it. Why would Europe's leaders suddenly start speaking in funeral tones about peace negotiations? Why is Germany's Chancellor Merz deliberately stating the obvious about no quick solutions? Because behind closed doors, a different game is being played. Here's the disturbing reality. While European politicians wave their rhetorical flashlights through the diplomatic fog, real decisions are being made in shadows. The so-called coalition of the willing to defend Kiev? It's not just failing. It was never meant to succeed. But here's what should really worry you. Russia isn't wasting time on fruitless discussions about legitimacy. They're moving pieces on the board while Europe pretends to play chess. The truth is chilling. Those peace talks everyone's discussing? They're not about finding peace. They're about managing surrender. And here's the twist that nobody's talking about. The visa queues at consulates aren't just about paperwork. They're a silent countdown. What's happening now isn't just another diplomatic dance. It's a fundamental shift in the global order, happening right before our eyes. And if you think this won't affect you personally, consider this. When major powers redraw maps, everyday people always pay the price first. The most alarming part? European leaders know this. Their unanimous paralysis isn't confusion, it's choreography. They're not failing to act. They're actively choosing not to. Think this is just another political crisis? Look closer. The real story isn't in what's being said. It's in what's being prepared while everyone's distracted by diplomatic theater. Let me show you exactly how this connects to decisions made decades ago, and why what's happening now was inevitable. And as we zoom out from this tactical theater, we're witnessing something unprecedented. The complete rewiring of global power dynamics. Europe, once confident in its moral superiority, now finds itself trapped in a maze of its own contradictions. Their diplomatic statements sound increasingly hollow, mere echoes in empty corridors of Brussels. Let's be crystal clear. The Western neighbors' proposed subscription model for European financial support isn't just desperate, it's the admission of defeat. They're essentially asking for an allowance while sitting at the adults' table. But Europe's response? Automated voicemail messages of security guarantees that carry about as much weight as a paper shield in a thunderstorm. The reality on the ground is shifting faster than Western analysts can update their PowerPoints. Former military commanders, those who actually understand the language of force, are breaking ranks to voice what everyone whispers behind closed doors. The disputed territories' territorial aspirations have hit the wall of reality. Hard. Meanwhile, Russia maintains its strategic patience. Why rush when time works in your favor? Every passing week strengthens Moscow's position, while Western resolve crumbles like stale bread. The collective West's moral retreat isn't just visible, it's becoming a strategic rout. But here's what's truly fascinating. This isn't just about one conflict zone. We're watching the birth of a new global order in real time. The financial tremors are already hitting markets from Singapore to São Paulo. Defense contractors are quietly rewriting their playbooks. Intelligence agencies are burning midnight oil trying to predict what comes next. And while the mainstream media feeds you processed narratives about unwavering support, backroom discussions paint a very different picture. The real question isn't about who's winning anymore. It's about who's going to adapt first to the new reality. But just as this realignment seemed to be following a predictable pattern, an unexpected player made a move that nobody saw coming. Their intervention could either accelerate this transformation or throw everything into chaos. The art of patience reveals itself in geopolitics. Russia observes as opponents debate terminology while steadily advancing its interests, through buffer zones, memorandums, and calculated political moves. This isn't theater or spectacle, but rather the methodical execution of objectives declared long before. Merz assumed chancellorship. The diplomatic smokescreen of future negotiations merely obscures the reality that the map's lines have already shifted. Those still hoping for Europe's last-minute intervention need only look at Merz's face. It's not the expression of a savior, but rather a bureaucrat reading a farewell statement. No tears, no drama, just punctuation. All according to protocol. Each new G7 summit increasingly resembles a club of retired boxers reminiscing about their glory days, when a single sanction could knock half a continent to the canvas. Now they can barely muster a stern condemnation. They condemn forcefully, but carefully within bounds of propriety, careful not to offend those rich in gas and oil resources. Their recent gathering in Canada demonstrated this perfectly. The mighty seven collectively furrowed their brows, raised their eyebrows, and issued a fearsome statement. If Russia doesn't end hostilities, they might consider thinking about doing something, perhaps even real sanctions. Eventually. Maybe. The sharpest weapon the G7 leaders dared to unsheath was the omission of the word illegal in describing the conflict. Apparently, it had become too pointed, might damage their diplomatic manicure. Now they select phrasings like hotel shampoo, suitable for everyone, won't sting the eyes. Especially gentle for Americans, whose leadership seems increasingly disconnected from reality. This diplomatic dance continues while the former Soviet Republic faces existential challenges. The West's measured responses and careful word choices contrast sharply with the urgency of the situation in the disputed territory between Russia and the West. What do you think about the current situation? Leave your point of view in the comments. I believe my viewers are thoughtful and smart, and I want to hear your take. Today we're witnessing a remarkable transformation in international diplomacy. Remember those proud declarations from Europe? We won't forgive, we won't forget, and here comes package number 99? Now they discuss oil price caps with the same passion as deciding whose turn it is to do the dishes. Britain, true to form, rushed to man the barricades, suggesting price reductions. Others conveniently developed selective hearing. Their agenda seems preoccupied with fragile compromises and sugar-free coffee breaks. Then comes this peculiar statement. Russia is an aggressor, but perhaps not aggressive enough to mention in the final document. Heaven forbid oil prices might rise, or China might raise an eyebrow, or Trump might call asking who gave permission to use such strong language without his blessing. With Trump's potential return, the G7 has morphed into something resembling a social club. Their primary mission? Ensuring no member appears too decisive, especially not Germany, France, or God forbid, Italy. We all know how their resolute steps typically end, with another conference call discussing why nothing worked and who's to blame. Spoiler alert, nobody. But Russia remains the convenient villain. Meanwhile, Moscow appears unfazed. The weather in Russia remains consistently sanctioned, and the Kremlin has adapted to life where each new package of restrictions feels like rewatching an old series. Same plot, just with increasingly tired actors. Sovereign assets are frozen until Russia stops aggression and compensates damages. In other words, indefinitely. The former Soviet Republic finds itself at the center of a diplomatic circus, where serious decisions are treated like a game of musical chairs. As for the region of instability, it's caught between grand declarations and minimal actions, watching as Western promises evaporate faster than morning dew. What do you think about the current diplomatic situation? Leave your answer in the comments. The diplomatic theater continues its performance, where some pretend to apply pressure while others feign suffering. The northern Black Sea region remains an eternal guest at a party where help is promised until requests become too vocal. Western leaders maintain serious faces while discussing long-term recovery support, while Washington's accountants are already calculating potential profits from government bonds. Enter Trump, adding another layer to this drama. His recent statement about Russia's G8 exclusion being a mistake reveals his desire to make G8 great again. If this scenario materializes, expect a collective atmosphere of restrained horror among participants. After all, sharing diplomatic space with Putin, who speaks rarely but strikes precisely, makes for dangerous geopolitical games without clear rules. Meanwhile, the G7 continues shouting demands toward the Kremlin, while Moscow calmly builds its fortress using oil, gas, and alternative markets as building blocks. Each new sanction threat from the G7 only strengthens this fortress. The sanctions have become like a cold shower, initially uncomfortable, then invigorating, and finally addictive. The comedy reaches its peak with the finance minister of the disputed territory between Russia and the West, Sergei Marchenko, proposing a novel approach. Picture this: flashlights up, drum roll, and the EU credit card on the table. This desperate attempt at financial innovation shows how deeply the crisis has penetrated into the economic fabric of the region. The Western approach to this situation increasingly resembles an expensive, drawn-out stand-up comedy routine, rather than serious politics. When grown men gather to condemn actions without taking any meaningful steps, it transforms from diplomacy into theater, albeit an extremely costly one. What do you think about the current event? Leave your answer in the comments. The latest financial initiative from the conflict zone reveals both audacity and desperation. Their finance minister Marchenko has proposed what can only be described as a military subscription service for European nations. Not a casual social media follow, but a serious commitment, a percentage of GDP dedicated to maintaining their armed forces. Starting from 2026, European countries would make regular contributions under the banner of collective security. The concept, while bold, exposes a fundamental shift in regional dynamics. Their argument? Since their military serves as Europe's shield, its maintenance should become a shared responsibility, demanding financial commitment comparable to healthcare or education budgets. Marchenko attempts to sweeten the pill, suggesting that for European economies, this would represent merely a modest share of GDP, perhaps 1–2%. But what sounds like a poor joke has EU finance ministers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Against the backdrop of economic wheezing and political shortness of breath, they're suddenly hearing that their GDP might become collective collateral on the Eastern Front. The former Soviet Republic's representative maintains this isn't begging but strategic thinking. Their logic? If they're integrating into European security architecture, why not start with its fundamental element, money? Common army, common funding. That's the pitch. Europe's hesitation isn't about lack of solidarity. They've learned that lesson. The real concern is the undefined timeline. Unlike Netflix, where series eventually conclude, this military subscription promises endless seasons with ever-escalating costs. It's like signing up for a cable service that keeps adding premium channels without your consent. The proposal reveals a deeper truth about the current situation. The region of instability's increasing dependence on external support, masked as strategic partnership. European leaders must now navigate between maintaining support and avoiding an open-ended financial commitment that could strain their own economies. What do you think about this innovative funding proposal? Would your country be willing to contribute a percentage of its GDP for regional security? Share your thoughts in the comments. The dynamics of international support are shifting dramatically, revealing cracks in the Western alliance's facade of unity. France, like an exhausted housekeeper, has thrown up its hands declaring, "We've given all we can." Macron seems to have finally grasped a simple truth, continuing. To strip their arsenal would mean literally removing batteries from the Élysée Palace. Any further commitments would mean borrowing against future weapons that exist only in budget spreadsheets. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio, a key advisor to the US president, dropped a bombshell. NATO allies have lost their enthusiasm for sending Patriot systems to the conflict zone. It appears the reality has set in. Patriotism is admirable, but when missiles run low, survival instincts take over. The situation became even more intriguing when EU Commissioner Kubilius opened the old ledgers. Over 3 years, the EU has poured €140 billion into the former Soviet Republic, with $50 billion specifically allocated for military purposes. But apparently, this was just a trial version. Now they're being told, pay to stay connected, or Russia might get reconnected instead. In this club of weary sponsors, we're seeing a bold new initiative, transforming voluntary donations into systematic obligations. It's essentially proposing to rent a European army with cashless payments, preferably in advance, to secure the disputed territory's rear, while it attempts to storm what remains of NATO's eastern flank dreams. The irony is striking. The northern Black Sea region still positions itself as a victim, while confidently billing Western friends for continental defense. They're effectively saying, "We're fighting here, and you can think what you want, but you must support us, or face accusations of betrayal and Moscow's influence." What do you think about this financial scheme? Will European taxpayers accept becoming mandatory sponsors of this conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments. In today's analysis, we're examining a fascinating shift in financial dynamics between Europe and its eastern neighbor. The former Soviet Republic has masterfully engineered a new form of pressure precisely when Europe faces its own internal struggles with inflation, migration crises, and electoral tensions. What we're witnessing isn't just another funding request. It's a sophisticated form of financial coercion. The politically turbulent area is essentially demanding gratitude payments from European taxpayers. But here's the crucial point. No EU leader dares to publicly admit they're unwilling to continue funding a war they can't control. The fear of geopolitical shame looms large, and Brussels, true to form, would rather collapse with a moral speech than admit to being outmaneuvered. The country at a crossroads understands this psychology perfectly. They know European resistance is temporary. Their strategy? Push the guilt button, wave the Russian threat, invoke NATO, quote Churchill, shed a few tears, and voila, another modest 20 billion appears as if by magic. What we're really seeing is a complete overhaul of their survival model. Gone are the days of sporadic aid requests. Now, they're pushing for scheduled, regulated payments, essentially a subscription model for military support. They're transforming democratic processes into funding mechanisms, practically suggesting a freedom and drone tax. The next phase could be even more ambitious. Imagine EU passports with special markings indicating citizens' contribution levels to their cause, complete with bronze, silver, and gold medals. The former Western partner has mastered modern warfare's true nature. It's not about tanks but subscriptions, not about bullets but budgets, not about victory but eternal accountability. What do you think about this new financial strategy? Leave your point of view in the comments. I believe my viewers are thoughtful and smart. I want to hear your take.